Okay, so we got past the ribbon, and that was the easy part. Now, the next thing to tackle are these Greek letters. Now, they don't have to be difficult, but they can be challenging because if you've never done it, it's like, well, where do we begin? Well, the best thing to do, in my opinion, is to leverage what we have. We have this thing called the internet. So let's just type in Rhinestone. Let me get my keyboard working here. Rhinestone Greek letters, because that's what we're doing. Or let's do Greek lettering. I could tell you when I first started a month and a half ago understanding rhinestones and drawing templates, I literally spent days upon days upon days looking at rhinestone designs and soaking it all in, seeing what other people did for lettering, for different flowers, you name it, whatever it was, flip-flops, whatever it was, I had in my head that I wanted to make. I wanted to see what other people did and understand, the different available options. And one thing that's interesting about Greek lettering is I've seen a lot of Greek lettering. But one thing that's interesting about Greek lettering that you'll see here very shortly is there's a lot of single line Greek lettering, lots of outline Greek lettering, but not a whole lot of Greek lettering with a fill and an outline. And when you look at our design kind of beckons an outline with a fill. It would be really nice to have a fill. If we're going for gold, I would probably use a citrine stone and then outline it with a cyan or light cyan stone. So I want to see what's out there. So we typed in rhinestone Greek lettering, go over here to Google Images, and take a look at some of what might be available on the internet. And for some reason my internet's being incredibly slow. And what you're going to see right off is there isn't much. There really isn't much out there. When you look, okay, that's a single line. And that is very, very small. What they did was kind of interesting. Let's just go ahead and click on that. What they actually did for this is kind of interesting. And this is something when, just kind of keep this in mind as you're looking through stuff. But this is a fairly small lettering in terms of height. Our lettering on our design is about 3 inches tall, and this is much, much smaller. I think it's only like maybe 2 inches tall. But what they did here is they have letters that are both SS10 and SS6. So like if you take our O here, or whatever symbol this is, it looks like an O. I don't know the proper terminology, but you see how it's like fatter right there. And if you look at our design, it's fatter right there, right? I guess that's the symbol for theta. So I don't know my Greek, but at any rate, so that's why they made it like they did. So this is done in SS10 and then all that's done in SS6. But for our purpose, because this is only 2 inches tall and ours is a little over 3 inches, I just don't think it's going to give us the look that we really want. So we'll go back and see if there's anything out there that we can draw inspiration from. Now this one here has a fill, doesn't have an outline, but it doesn't really have the same type of symbols as our design does anyhow. So we'll just kind of pass that one. See, here's an outline one. That would be easy enough to do an outline. There's a single line. So we just kind of keep coming through here. Now this one here, this one we could see, this one we can glean something from. We can glean something from this, because let's look at this. Let's go ahead and open this up. And this is exactly what I was looking for, is where do we have something to begin with. And you can see there's our delta symbol, and you can see what we have here. We have a single line of stones at the bottom. We've got 2 lines of stones along here, single line of stone here. But this is the one that's probably the most challenging out of everything. And you can't really see it very well, but it's so simple, right? Because we have one outline of stones, and then they had another set of stones on the inside. And then this is just 2 lines of horizontal stones, and it looks like 2 lines of vertical stones for the theta. So that's, you know, we can recreate that. That's no big deal. And then let's go ahead and close that out. And then let's go back here, and there is our sigma. And when we look at this design, you can see with this design, where to go here? There it is. We've got 2 lines of stones here, and then we have one going across, one coming down, one going across. But here's the thing. Look at our design. See how this, like E, has like this curve thing going on? And see how this right here has this curve thing going on? We just ignore that. That's, you know, in a perfect world, if we were doing this in vinyl, we'd probably have those curves. So because we're doing rhinestones, forget that. We don't need that, because if you go back and look, you can see the symbol is much more simplistic, and these stones are basically just straight line, straight line, straight line, and a straight line, and the symbol is still very recognizable. So, and what's even more interesting with this is we're going to be able to do our fill, and because of the simplicity, the way they simplified all these designs, we're going to be able to create an outline for this very, very easily. And it'll look great. So, we can go ahead and get out of there. So now we have a little bit of our inspiration, right? We know what we're going to do for the delta and the theta, and we know what we're going to do over here for our sigma. And that's what I do a lot of times when I'm looking to create something, is what's already been done, and what do I like. And so now we know that for our theta, that's going to be the most challenging one. I wasn't really sure in my mind how I was going to handle that, but for this one, now we have a good understanding of how we're going to handle that. So let's go back into CorelDRAW here and begin the process. Now, earlier I didn't do this in part 1, but when we're tracing a bitmap here, or using this as a go-to start point, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to right-click on this and lock that bitmap down. You might want to put it on its own layer and lock the layer, whatever you want to do there. So to begin with here, let's take the most simplest form, the one that we can actually see, and that is in its entirety, and that is the delta. Now, I think what I would like to do is I would like to do 2 lines of stones for this line and this line, and I would like to do 4 lines of stone for this thickness. And whatever I do here, I have to kind of copy that over to the sigma. So we got 4 lines here, 2 on this side, 4 lines, 2. Okay, and for the little vertical stones here, would probably do those 2. And then over here, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have more or less like 4 stones, and then same thing going horizontally, we're going to have 4 stones. I don't know, that's what I would like. I don't know if that's doable, because I don't know if we've got the room for it. But that's kind of in my mind where I would begin. So we know that we would like to do the stones. I think we would like to do the gold stones in SS10. The less SS6 stones we use, probably the better, just because SS10 is easier to work with. So what I'm going to do here is I already have, I'm going to first of all pick a different color to work with by default, and then we'll just choose this add sample button, and basically all it does is it adds a single stone, whatever dimension that I told it to. And I'm just going to bring the stone over here. Now you could see that given the width of this letter, you know, in all reality, we don't have room for 2 stone width here. That doesn't mean we can't. That just means The original artwork really doesn't reflect that. But who cares, right? maybe we'll, it's all about the bling factor. So maybe we'll do 2 lines anyhow. But let's look at this. So if we have 1 line here, I'm going to click and drag. We got 1 line there, click and drag, and we've got 3 there, and then we click and drag a 4th to get our 4 lines of stones. Well, we're going to be using some pretty creative licensing there for the extra width. The challenge that we have, and this is really just a matter of personal preference here, but this is what I would like to see for this design, is I would like to see these 3 letters not overlap. It's going to look so much better, I think, in Rhinestones to not have these letters overlapping. So that's the way I would draw it and show it to the customer. And because of that, we would be adding quite a bit to the width if we were to use that 4 stone. And so, for simplicity's sake, I don't think we'll do it. We'll just do 3, we'll do 1, and maybe not have as much bling. Okay, so now we have a good understanding of what we're going to do. Now we just have to do it. So, how do you do it? Well, I tend to be very, very anal when I have a I was an architect years ago. That's what I went to college for, was architecture. And in architecture, we have to be very, very exact. And so I spend most of my days wasting time because I just can't help myself but to be spot on perfect. Because, like I said, in the architectural world, you have to be that way. Otherwise, your building will collapse. So, I tend to go a little bit farther with these rhinestone designs than maybe the average person would. So to begin with, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag down a guideline. And of course, under the View menu, I have the Snap to Guideline function turned on. And then what we're going to do here is we'll drag out another guideline. And I'm just going to drag it right to the tip of that letter, or close to it. Okay? And then if I click on that line a second time, I get this, like I want to rotate the guide. And then you get this little thing right here. That is where on the guideline it's going to rotate from. And it's just by happenstance that it's close to the tip. That's purely happenstance. So what we're going to do here is just grab that and move it so it is actually right at the tip. And then what we can do here is we can grab that guideline, and you can see it's rotating right at the tip of the letter, and drag it down. And now you can see that that guideline goes right along that angle of our design. Now, if we had a vector, having that angle already exist for us would have been kind of nice. But aside from that, the vector would have done absolutely nothing for us. And you know what's really cool is when you're selecting a guideline, it's actually just an object like anything else. So what we can do, let me undo that. What we can do is we can select the guideline, click and drag it, and right-click it. See that? So now we have a duplicate of the guideline. You say, well, why is that significant? Well, I can click on it, and I can like rotate it back to, so I can't like mirror it like I can with a regular object, but I can like rotate it to the point where it's as if it was mirrored. So they have the exact opposite direction. And then what I can do here is I can bring it over and position it right here where I need it. And you can see that that guideline is actually, that's interesting. It's not what I would have expected, that's for sure. Because you can see that this angle is actually different slightly than this one. I don't know if it should be. I don't think it should be, but it is. So let's stay true to the original artwork. Let's not try and second guess it. And let's keep that angle exact. So what we'll do is we'll click on that guideline and we'll find our center. Where is our center rotation? See, it's way down here. See that little point there? So we'll drag it up and it's going to snap to the intersection. And then when I rotate this, I can click anywhere on the line and rotate it, and it's going to rotate from that corner. And so that takes on that same angle. Okay, so now we have our two angles the way we need them for our stones. So now we're just going to begin the process of creating our stone pattern for this letter. Now, the other thing that maybe we want to consider is if we look at this issue, what I would like to do is, remember, I would like to space these letters so they don't overlap. But I can't really move this letter over much because it interferes with my ribbon. And if I move this letter over enough to clear this letter, and then move this letter enough to clear this letter, it's going to hang out over here. And say, well, why is all that significant? Well, because obviously we wouldn't want that. So I think really what we have to do is all these letters have to get a little bit smaller to not be overlapping, and still be within our maximum width of 9 inches for the ribbon. So what I will probably do is, rather than actually stone these letters right now, I'm just going to create kind of a basic placeholder. So what I'll do here, I'm going to move this guideline down a little bit so that's roughly in the center of where we're going to eventually stone it. Same thing with this design here. Let's move this guide right over to the center of where we're going to stone it. Now this guide over here, we have to kind of just do a little bit of creative license. Let's go ahead and let's add a sample. There is our sample stone, and let's move it right into place, right where that's going to be, right? And we've already determined roughly that if we come across and we come across, okay, with that we're going to do 3 wide. So this right here, we're going to move it right here. And what we might wind up doing, actually, because we have to make this letter smaller, we might only do 2 stones wide. But we'll work on that a little bit later. We'll see what's available to us. So for right now, that's kind of where we're going to go with things. So what I'm going to do is simply grab my pen tool and drag out some lines. So because I'm using the snap to guideline function, I can just snap at the intersection, snap at the intersection, snap at the intersection. There's my guideline. Let's go ahead and apply an outline without a fill. Okay? I've applied that outline by simply right-clicking on the color for my outline, and then I left-clicked no fill. So that is our basic shape to begin with. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to delete these guidelines because they'll do nothing but drive me completely mad. The more guidelines that we add, the more crazy I'm going to get. So then we move on to the second letter. And again, here I'm just going to drag down a line. We're going to zoom in tight here. We know we want this line to be center, where our center of our stone is going to be. And we'll do another one. And we're just going to kind of do it by gosh or by golly. That's about where it's going to be. We'll call it good enough. Then I'm going to drag down another guideline. And this guideline here is going to be, what we're going to do here is we're actually going to click it, and we're going to rotate it somewhat. Something like that. And then we're going to click it again, and just anywhere along the edge, just click and drag and snap it to this other guideline. And then what we want is we want to bring these guidelines right together right there. And then the rotation point for this guideline, there it is. We got to drag it down where those two intersect, so that when we rotate our guide, you can see now our guide is right along that edge. Okay, then we're going to take this guide that we just created and move it so it's right in the center of where our stone's going to be. And essentially we got to do the same process to the top. This is a little bit more tricky because we have letters that are overlapping one another. We can't actually see all the element, but there's enough peeking through where we can get the job done. So let's drag it down, zoom in nice and tight here, and there's the point that I'm going to say it's at. I'm going to click on it. There's my center rotation anchor point. I'm going to move it over to where I want it, and then I can click and drag anywhere on the guide and rotate it to kind of mimic that same angle of this particular letter. And so then when these two meet, that's where the overlap is occurring right there. Now we do the exact same thing. Drag a guideline down, call it where we want it. We want it right there. We click on it. There's the center rotation. You know what? It's pretty good right where it's at. So we can just rotate it. Okay? And where those two meet, that's just where they meet. Okay? So that gets us that angle. And then we can see how this angle is going to come together, and so on and so forth. And then finally we'll just drag over a guideline right here, and that's where our vertical is going to get. So now we've got just an absolute mad crazy zigzag going every which direction, but it'll be pretty straightforward now that we have this in place. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take this outline and just get it out of our way for right now. We'll just move it over there. And then we'll grab our pen tool and start the magic. So let's grab our pen tool, and we're just going to pick at that intersection point, pick at this intersection point, and then we're going to come down here, and we'll pick where those two intersect, and we'll come down here and pick where this intersects. Come over here, and let's see here, I think right here where that vertical is, and then whatever line, whatever distance we want going vertically, that's just what we're going to have right there. Okay, and I think that is good enough, so we'll stop that, and let's go ahead and give it a color. We'll just right click on it to show the outline, and there's that outline that we just created. Okay, so that kind of just gives us a boundary, if you will, of where it's going to be. Alright, so then the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my pen tool again. I tell you what, let's go ahead and set a default outline color so that when we create a line we can see it right away. Just right click on any color, and now we have red path. So now I'm just going to click right here, and I'm just going to copy these guidelines, and this is just for kind of future reference at this point. And then we're just going to have to do one horizontally here to kind of define that as well. And we'll just kind of just do it just like that. That just kind of gives us a definition, and that's it. Okay? So that pretty much takes care of that letter. And then probably what I would do for simplicity's sake is select all of that and combine it together as one, and we'll break it apart a little bit later. So now you can see we've got one gigantic mess of these little guidelines going every which direction. So let's just double click, align, and I can just clear horizontally, and then we'll do vertically clear and click OK. Oops, I guess I didn't clear out my horizontal guidelines. There we go. So now all my guidelines go bye-bye. Alright, so we have that step taken care of. So there is our second letter. And then we move on to this. And this is very, very straightforward, right? Because we just know that we've got one strand of stones going vertically, right there. Hit the space bar to get out of our pen tool. Just left click and drag. Hold my shift key to constrain exactly horizontal. Right click, and there is an exact duplicate. And then again, I would drag my guideline down, grab my pen tool, and just click and click, just to give us some type of definition. We're not going to actually use that line when we actually stone this out, but it does give us a point to start. And we'll right click and make a duplicate of it. So there's the inside of our circle. And then we want to duplicate the circle as best we can. So I'm just, oops, sorry about that. I grabbed the wrong tool. So hit the escape key. What we need is our circle tool. And we're just going to drag it out. And we'll give it no fill. And then we'll just kind of manipulate this here. So we'll just drag it over to here. We'll drag it over to here. Okay, and then we'll drag it up top. And that gets us pretty darn close, if I do say so myself. Close enough for what we need. You can see it's not exact, but who knows? Maybe the original artwork isn't spot on perfect either. But at least it's close enough. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to grab another circle and drag it out. Again, no fill. And we'll grab this and we'll pull it over to the edge. Pull it over to the edge. We will pull it down to this point here, and then we will pull it up to that point there. Something like that. Okay? So that kind of gets us where we want. And then what we're going to do here is these objects in the center. Let's carefully pick those. I need to. This button here is the treat as filled. We'll uncheck that. I can select these objects right here and combine those together. That's one piece. And then I'm going to select these two lines. I'm actually going to group those. So Control G, or actually, let me back up a moment. I selected those two circles, and then I'm going to hit C and E. C and E centers vertically and horizontally. So now they're perfectly centered with one another. Now I will group them together, and then go with the this object here, and our circle object there, and then we'll go ahead and do the same thing. We want to do Control C, Control E. Oh, I'm sorry. We don't want to do that. We want to do C and E, not Control C and E. Alright, so now these center objects are exactly centered vertically, horizontally with these other objects. Okay? So there are our three objects. Just the outlines, just to give us a point in which we can start working with these. Now we do need to leave a little bit of space because obviously we've got to have some stones there. But essentially that is more along the lines of what I was looking for. Something like that. So what I'll actually do here to keep with the original flow of the design is I'm going to actually group these together now. So that's now one object. Is I'm going to go ahead and drag this over here, and that's about position right. Let's get really particular here. So there's that object, and then we have this object. I'm going to go ahead, I think I combined those together, so we'll go ahead and position it. Okay, then get that back in position like we had it. This was right here, if I remember correctly. Something about like so. And then this piece was right, this bottom piece was right in the middle. Okay, something like that. Alright, so that's how it was originally. So what we want to do then is we want to keep the staggered exactly like it is, but we're just going to use our arrow keys to kind of nudge that piece over, and then we'll grab this piece and nudge it over enough where we can leave room for to stone and to stone, and that's pretty close. And then this piece here, we can move it back a little bit. I think that's enough room for a couple of stones there. So that takes care of that, and now you can see what I was talking about before, where this is actually over our ribbon. So what we're going to do then is we're going to select all three of these and scale them back down so they will fit like we would want them to. And maybe that's a little bit too far, so we want them as big as we can get them, but let's keep it within the ribbon. So maybe we've got a little bit of room over here. Let's go ahead and the other thing too we have to keep in mind, and I just now thought of this, these outlines indicate the SS10 stones, but we're going to add an outline in Rhinestones as well in SS6. So let's make it a little bit smaller to allow for the extra space that we have. And I think that in the end is going to be pretty decent. So that's where we're at up to this point. And it may seem like, wow, that was complicated. And I don't know. Maybe it is complicated. But that's the only way I know to tackle it. Is just to break it down bit by bit by bit. That's all I know, because I haven't really seen it demonstrated in any of those other programs that are available, whether it be WinPC Sign or whatever. Is, you know, you could just take this, stick it in there, push a button, and boom, you got a logo that you can use. So it is probably insanely complicated. When I'm sitting here explaining it, it takes a whole lot longer than just if I were just to actually do it, because I already knew exactly how I would tackle the design when I first saw it, but trying to explain it bit by bit by bit, it does take a little bit longer. So it's really not that complicated, but I probably made it more complicated than I needed to. So now we have the basic outlining of our letter. Now we can go in and actually stone this out. That's what we'll do in our next part. We'll stone out those letters, and then we'll move on to our elephant.